huge mana pool. It's not that he's not fast, because if any of you know, the Pit Lord is just as fast as a lot of heroes. He's just bigger, and people tend to think that big things move faster than small things. But I'm not going to bother getting into why that is and blah blah blah. Anyway, so the Pit Lord is creeping. He's just using basic creeping strategies, using a Rod of Necromancy, because you need to make sure that your skeletons are tanking for your hero instead of your hero or your fiends, because you can't coil them like you normally could if you had a Death Knight. There's no question that the Pit Lord is weaker than a Death Knight early on. However, it's sort of like just an early investment. Later on, he will become much more powerful, and that is what wins him the game, is just having such a strong Pit Lord. And you also see, as he's creeping this spot, he uses Howl. He doesn't save him for battles and stuff. He just goes ahead and uses them because it really helps you creep and keep your skeletons alive, so you can quickly move from camp to camp. It reduces a ton of damage, 10% first level, 22nd, and 30 for the other level, I think. Unless it's something crazy like 15 something and then 50. But I'm pretty sure it's 10, 20, 30. But correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't matter. It's a lot. It's enough to make it seem like you're removing 10, 20, or 30% of the attacking force, which is basically it's the only spell in the game which can totally remove a percentage of your opponent's damage output. Now, Imp is running over to put up a expansion. If you check his hero, he should have a sacrifice skull, and he does. He has also brought over an acolyte. The main point in this is basically to put up an expansion early to allow himself to get necro wagons wagons and necromancers. And yes, he's using necromancers and wagons against a Night Elf player. Most people would say that, maybe that's dumb because he can use wisps or whatever, and no, it's not dumb, it's awesome, and it works. Wisps aren't really enough to dispel all the skeletons that get created by the wagons, and dryads can't really dispel them either. The only other option the Night Elf player has is to use fairy dragons. However, fairy dragons don't do too well against fiends, as you can probably guess. I'm not sure what happens when if a fiend even can web a fairy dragon that's in Mana Flare, but I would assume it just comes out of Mana Flare. But I'm not sure about that. It really doesn't happen all that much because most Night Elf players won't get fairy dragons against undead. It just doesn't seem smart. So, like I said, he's just creeping. He's creeping using his skill, and now he just got level 3. For a secondary skill, he's training Rain of Fire. I particularly, when I go Pit Lord, I like to get Cleave. I think it's an extremely strong strategy. Actually, I'm watching him now, and he might have got Cleave too. I'm not sure, but either way, both skills are strong. It depends if you get some statues or not. I was watching a game earlier where he got Rain of Fire and Rain of Fire himself. So, I've been watching a bunch of these games, and I guess I'm just sort of mixing them up a bit. But either way, Rain of Fire, Cleave, both are strong. Cleave does siege damage to all the units that he can hit, or basically does splash damage to all the units he can hit, not siege damage. Strong skill. It's sort of underrated. I used to do a strategy where I would bring the Pit Lord in second as my second hero, and I would use Unholy Frenzy from a Necromancer to make him attack, twice as fast. And I would pick Cleave as my first skill, and he would do a ton of damage early on. It would be it'd be a really great strategy against Night Elves and Orcs, and actually worked against all races pretty well. If you look over on the left side, there's an expansion up. This expansion will allow him to build all the buildings that he just created: 2 slaughterhouses and 2 Temple of the Damned, and that's a lot of production buildings. It's a total of 5, including the crypt. And he will get in another expansion later, I believe, and basically, this is why this strategy works so well, is because you're able to quickly get a lot of expansions because of the creeping power of the Pit Lord once he hits level 3 and that Death Knight comes out. And you are basically able to overpower your enemy by using, you know, the basic Necro Wagon principle of just get a crap load of skeletons. And you'll see that later. There'll just be so many skeletons that his opponent will have to teleport out. He has no choice but to leave and try to bring up some wisps and counter, but you'll see later that he just will not be able to do that. It'll be overwhelmed by skeletons, and you know, the game will quickly come to an end when we see that. You will also see later the very interesting use of a Goblin Zeppelin to carry around the wagons, which definitely makes it overall a lot easier to move around those slow units. They're so delicate and so expensive, they cost 4 food, and if you get rally jacked, or you know, if someone comes up behind you and you have to move your siege and you have to switch your positions of your units, which what I mean is if your units are in the wrong order, you have your ranged units in the back or in the front facing your opponent and your melee stronger units behind them. You need to switch those two around, and with the siege units that take a ton of damage, it's very hard to do that quickly. The Zeppelin allows him to just quickly move those units around, and you will see that shortly when he starts making wagons, which he will do after he gets some statues, because statues are extremely important. I will say it again, they're extremely important to keep the mana on the casters. You need to keep the mana on them because they need to be able to cast skeletons all the time. If they don't, your opponent will easily be able to teleport out, let the skeletons time out, and then you'll be screwed because you'll be fighting and you'll drop all your corpses and you'll hit auto cast or whatever, hit your skeleton skill, and nothing will happen and you'll be crying. So don't let that happen to you. Make sure that you pay attention to your mana. Excuse me. One mistake that Imp has made at this point of the game is, if you see up at the top, he has made an expansion, yet he only has one guy mining it. He decided to tech to tier 3, which is very smart. However, he doesn't have any. He doesn't have any acolytes to fuel that mine. That's the problem with Undead, and why it's hard to expand, is because they are constantly teching to get up to tier 3 to get destroyers. They are not going to be, overall using a ton of, or not going to have a lot of time to focus on creating acolytes for their other expansions. And if you saw that battle towards the bottom of the map, what basically happened there was the Night Elf player came in to try to creep jack Imp, and he summoned 2 skeletons from all the corpses, and I think there's 5 corpses at that camp, which basically gave him 10 skeletons, and 10 skeletons plus the army that he has is much larger than the opponent's army, especially when you consider that a large number of his forces were ranged, or are ranged, archers, and skeletons obviously destroy archers pretty well. So the Night Elf player makes a smart decision and says, hey, I'm going to start making dryads to counter some of those skeletons. But what he doesn't realize yet is that we're going to see some Necro Wagon action. I mean, we're not going for the basic, a couple skeletons or a couple necromancers to support the army type thing, and then get fiends. I mean, he's really trying to get 1 billion skeletons, and dryads can't counter that, as I mentioned before. And later you'll see wisps come up, but wisps aren't going to be enough to defend against it. You'll also see right here that he just picked up a Dark Ranger. Actually gave the Dark Ranger the Orb of Corruption, which, obviously that's normal practice with your Lich, but seeing as that you're getting a Pit Lord first and Death Knight second, you can get a Dark Ranger and put the Orb of Corruption on that hero. The reason behind getting that hero is because when you're facing off against a Demon Hunter and a Panda, you're definitely going to have a hard time,